Now, long preamble, bit of a shaggy dog story. But I hope you get where I'm going here. I'm not suggesting pastoral leaders should see the people in their care as dogs, although you will come home sometimes from meetings pretty sure you have identified the biggest offspring of a female canine on the board. And no matter how we may feel about our congregations in times of high anxiety, I'm not suggesting that we should call them packs of dogs. But when we're talking about anxiety in the system, in the people who behave toward us from a reactive stance, or our own anxiety and reactivity, we are in the same realm as canine behavior. We're talking about that part of us, our conditioned behaviors that we like to think we've evolved beyond. But I haven't grown out of my amygdala any more than Shadow has. Now, my dog can be patterned not to react immediately to certain stimuli to a point. She can be patterned to adopt different reactive stance to a point with my help and consistent reinforcement. But I know that I'm smarter than she is. My brain is bigger than hers, and I have the advantage of a more fully developed sensory cortex. I can also be reprogrammed. And I can appreciate why that's necessary on a higher level than she can. And she learns that she behaves better, she gets a treat. I know that I behave better and get to keep my job. I can also reason that more can be accomplished with less trouble, even less work, if I respond rather than react to the way those in my care behave. I can also anticipate the consequences of my actions and theirs, and in far more detail than Shadow can. Do I always behave as I know I should? Well, if you want consistency, get a dog and train her well. But if you have Steinke's book from the recommended reading list, you'll find this in chapter 5. Steinke refers to two routes through the brain. Both begin in the sensory thalamus, where the brain immediately registers emotional stimulus. One road Steinke calls the low road, on the level of the animal brain, or some literature refers to this as the reptilian brain. I'd rather think of a dog than a lizard here. The low road runs from sensory thalamus on a short route to amygdala. And it's from the amygdala that our reactions, Steinke calls them mindless reactions, it's from there that they emerge. Now, Steinke reminds us that this road has a great advantage. It's the route of speed and simplicity. It's direct, and it's not a long trip. And it can feel really good to follow it. When we really want to discharge some energy, when we're really out to zing somebody, well, this is the path to follow. But it's also the path that we're likely to follow first when we're tired out, distressed, feeling threatened, or actually under threat. This is the path where we choose fight or flight. This is where we can start to bark and growl, even while our tails are still wagging. Now, according to Steinke, the high road moves on a slower route from the sensory thalamus to the sensory cortex. From deep inside, from deep inside to that part of the brain that's up front and closer to the world and closer to the people that we have to live with and lead. The sensory cortex is the chamber of sober second thought. Well, like the Senate, I guess. Steinke says the high road is the way of accuracy and precision. And at the end of the road, there is the safe place of reflective response. This is the road we'll follow when we're at our best, firing on all cylinders, fully conscious of our role as leaders. This is the role we know we should follow when we encounter people who are on the low road, people who don't appear to know there's another route, and people who are pushed to their worst in times of high anxiety and can't manage any better at the moment. When we encounter people who are on the low road, we can quite easily be pulled onto that road with them. And we also encounter people who figure out very quickly how to force us onto that road. And if we're smart, we'll catch on to these manipulative sorts. But there will also be people who push buttons within us that we may not even be aware are there on the control panel. And most of the time, these people will remind us of other people, of our relationships, and our relationships with them will feel like other relationships, often relationships shaped by forces like fusion and emotional cutoff. Other people to whom we may even be conditioned to react rather than respond. Other relationships shaped from that most basic animal level of ourselves, our brains. We may even discover that we are drawn toward such people because they touch in us the relationships we have in our own family systems that are shaped by forces like fusion and emotional cutoff. So how do we get and stay on the high road? Remember Shadow, when she gets that first sight and first whiff of another leashed dog, there's that split second before she reacts. She can read the energy in her immediate environment, most of which is coming from me, because she can't get close to the other dog to sniff and take an accurate reading. There are times in which she will look at me and then at the other dog, and then bark and growl and try to charge. Now I know with practice I can take advantage of that split second and reshape her reaction, establish in that moment, not just in that moment, but whenever she's on the leash, that I'm the dominant dog and I give the cues. Now, when anxiety is high in our environment, and the stakes may be even higher, we still have a choice and time to choose between reaction and response. We can still take that moment and change our heading from the low road to the high. But it takes practice. It takes learning the hard way. But the healthier we are, the higher our functional level of self-differentiation, the better able we will be to respond as we know we should. The better able we will be to take that moment and to know we have a choice. I also want to encourage you to find mentors, to look to leaders whose emotional health and maturity you can recognize, and to spend time with them to soak them up and to hold them within yourselves as models of appropriate responsive behavior. But I also want to encourage you to look within your congregational milieu for the self-differentiated people, those whose emotional health and maturity you can see in your church, in your community, and cultivate relationships with them. Within your pastoral charge, you will spend plenty of time with less healthy people. The job will require it, and you will be required to enter into situations of high anxiety which can affect you in ways you may be aware of going in and in ways that you won't be aware of perhaps till long after the event. You will also be inevitably drawn to some of the less healthy people in your pastoral charge because of your own weakness and vulnerability. You will always be a work in progress. So don't neglect the people in your care whose strength can help you maintain yours. Cultivating this capacity to be a non-anxious presence doesn't mean we will somehow learn not to be anxious. How to avoid being anxious? How to avoid being affected by the anxiety of others? We are human beings who interact with other human beings on multiple levels. We will never be immune from anxiety. It's also not about becoming numb or practicing the stiff upper lip or finding a way to detach all or part of ourselves from the reality that we must live in and work in. It's not about diversion or denial. Being a non-anxious presence means recognizing our own anxiety for what it is, ours and no one else's. And knowing the need of the moment is not to act out of our own anxiety or anyone else's. Anxiety is contagious. In human systems, no less than in the dog park. But so is the non-anxious presence. The effect of the non-anxious presence may not be as sudden or as dramatic as spreading anxiety, but it works. Anxiety lingers and contaminates any environment. Anxiety-based behavior and anxiety-causing events excuse me, affect a system long after the event has occurred, long after behavior has changed, long after the person is gone. The leader's non-anxious presence can change the emotional weather, sometimes for many seasons afterward. The leader's non-anxious presence can set the tone. In an environment of heightened anxiety, those who look to the leader will be affected by the level of anxiety the leader exhibits. This may not happen as quickly as it does when dog and human are linked by a leash, but it happens.